let's look at some of the types of stormwater controls. So, like I'm saying, the main type that we're going to see are going to be detention basins. This is like a pond that we dig on our site. Let's say we've got a forested area. We're taking all the trees off. We're building a new Walmart because we don't want to have to drive 4 miles down the road to Walmart. We need one a little closer. So let's build a new Walmart. And when we do that, the folks developing the Walmart need to put a big retention pond or 2 or 3 on the site to capture that excess runoff that's going to occur. There are these terms wet and dry detention. Dry detention is basically a pond that in between storms is going to be dry. So when it rains over time, that the water in that pond is going to soak into the ground and go away. A wet detention basin is one that probably the water table is very close to the surface and it just can't soak into the ground. So it's just going to store that runoff, but it's going to stay wet all the time. And depending on where you live throughout the country or throughout your state, the soils and the water table are going to determine a lot of times whether you've got a wet or dry detention basin. And you just have to account for that in your designs. There's other types of stormwater controls as well. A vegetated swale, so between like a divided highway, you've got a low area that's grassed and rain just collects in there and it can kind of soak into the ground. Sometimes, you'll take an area and put specific types of sand there, very high infiltration sands, to force that runoff to soak into the ground quicker. They've also got a lot of other technologies like porous pavement, where some of that rainfall is going to soak through the pavement and so forth. Okay, so these are all structured or engineering controls after you get that runoff that's flowing. But sometimes we'll try to go to the source and say, hey, let's prevent the runoff from occurring at all. So let's use disconnected impervious surfaces or maybe no impervious surface at all on our site. Let's allow all that rain to soak into the ground. Or let's try to capture the rainfall before it hits the ground. Sometimes I've seen like rooftops, rooftops that are vegetated that can capture and soak up some of that rainfall. So a lot of different things. For us, though, and for the PE exam, we're really going to focus on these detention basins. Okay. So like I said, stormwater detention basins, we're trying to control the peak rate of runoff. And so if we look at this figure, this is this solid line, this is what the hydrograph or flow rate versus time would do when we developed a site. It'd be way up here. But we're trying to mimic what happened naturally. So we're going to allow it to rise up to a certain point, but then we're not going to let that pond get any higher after that storm, okay? We're going to control the max height that pond can get, and then it's going to kind of start going back down once we stop getting flow into our pond. How are we going to do that? Well, we're going to do that by understanding some relationships here. Now, this is a kind of a side view of a detention basin. Okay, so you have inflow coming into our pond. We have outflow going out. Where's this outflow coming from? It's coming from this control structure, this outfall structure. And this outfall structure is how we try to limit the height of the water that can get in the pond. Okay, because when the water rises to a certain point, it's going to flow out. Let's talk about these relationships here on the left. Stage storage. This is just basically a relationship between, okay, if the water is a foot deep, it's going to have a certain volume, right? So the stage is 1 feet. There's a volume that goes with that we could calculate for how big our pond is. If the water rises to 2 feet in the pond, it's going to be a greater volume. It's going to store more water. So the stage storage relationship, we could write a table or create a curve that shows as the stage increases, how does the volume in our pond increase? Okay, we could calculate that if we knew some information about the size of the pond. All right, and then we've got this other relationship, stage discharge. All right, that says As the water rises in our pond, it's going to flow out faster the higher it gets. Okay, it's going to force it through this outfall structure quicker.